There is a rule about your clothes. You are not allowed to lean. Not toward the men's side, not toward the women's side. Leaning is the one thing the job does not permit, and the job is priest. You are Bugis in South Sulawesi. Your society counts 5 genders, not 2. And you are the 5th, the one that does not sit inside the other 4. You handle the regalia. You bless the marriages. You speak the language the gods are addressed in, and there is no route into that work through being an ordinary man or an ordinary woman. Islam reaches your coast in the middle of the 16th century. Here is the part nobody puts in the thumbnail. After that, your people keep doing this work for roughly 400 more years. Let's get one thing straight. Whatever ended the Bissu, it was not a religion arriving. It arrived, and then 4 centuries passed, and they were still there. The thing that came for them showed up in the 1950s, carrying a rifle and a political program. The system, as it gets described in the literature: Orowane, a man; Makunrai, a woman; Kalalai, assigned female, living a male role; Kalabai, assigned male, living a female role; and Bissu. Sharon Graham Davies published the book-length version of that account in 2007. The 5-part structure turns up, in the same order, with the same terms, across a stack of later studies by different people who are not citing each other for the shape of it. And Bissu is not simply the 5th item on a list. In the way it gets described, Bissu is the position that does not belong to any of the other 4 a mediator standing between them, rather than a 6th thing standing next to them. Notice what else is on that list, because it usually gets skipped. Kalalai and Kalabai are not the same thing as Bissu, and they are not the same thing as each other. 2 more named positions, sitting between the 2 you already know, each with its own word. That matters more than the headline number does. A society with an exception clause has 1 word for everybody who does not fit. A society with a taxonomy has 4. This is the second kind. Somebody sat down at some point and worked out where the joints were. Which brings us back to the clothes. Being neutral is not a personal style here. It is a requirement of the office. A Bissu who leans has broken something. Sit with that for a second, because it cuts against the way this story usually gets sold. This is not a society that shrugged and let people be whatever they wanted. It is a society with a 5th category and strict rules for staying inside it. Freedom is not the word. Structure is the word. The work itself is old, older than the arrival of any world religion on this coast. Leonard Andaya, the historian, wrote a study of the Bissu for a volume on women, gender, and history in Southeast Asia, published by the University of Hawaii Press in 2000. Christian Pelrus, at the École des Hautes Études in Paris, covered them in his 1996 monograph on the Bugis. Gilbert Hamonic published an entire book with the French National Research Center in 1987 on Bissu ritual language and pre-Islamic power. 3 researchers, 3 countries, 3 decades. They converge on the same core, a priestly role understood as combining male and female, holding ritual authority, standing between the community and the divine. Hamonic's book is the one I keep thinking about, because of what he chose to study, not the costumes, the language, the incantations, the ritual speech, the words that only work coming out of this particular kind of mouth. And Andaya's study points at something the Bugis themselves are doing with this role. The origin stories, the accounts of how the world and the kingdoms began, put the Bissu at the founding, not added later, present at the start. That is not decoration. If your people's account of where everything came from has you standing in it, you are very hard to describe as a deviation from the norm. You are the norm's foundation stone. Now I owe you a piece of housekeeping, and it is going to sound like a small thing. Every one of those 3 scholars is real, published, and reachable. But the specific sentences I found attributed to them tonight came to me second-hand, quoted inside later papers. Some of them translated twice, one of them a literary analysis rather than a work of history. I did not have the originals open in front of me. So you are getting their conclusions at the level all 3 agree on, and you are not getting quotation marks. There is a version of this script where I put their words on screen in a serif font and you trust me more. That version is worse. And there is one detail I want badly, and am not going to use. A 16th century European account, describing what these priests were and what the Europeans thought of it with a comparison to what was being done to people like them back in Europe at the same moment. It is the single most quotable thing I found all week. It reached me through a chain of citations ending in a paper about a novel. Until I read the page it actually sits on, it stays out. This is not a love story about tolerance, and I am not going to build one out of a quote I cannot open. So, here is the timeline that breaks the usual version of this story. Islam is taken up in South Sulawesi, around the middle of the 16th century. In Pelrus's account, The conversion of one of the kingdoms was managed by a teacher who deliberately connected Islamic doctrine to existing Bugis belief rather than demolishing it. The Bissu lose ground after that. Their standing at court fades as the courts become Muslim. That much is in the record, and I am not going to soften it. But losing standing is not the same as being destroyed. Through those centuries, they keep working, blessing marriages, performing healing rites inside a society that is now Muslim, in a role that predates it. In 1957, the palace of one Bugis kingdom formally closes, as the aristocracy loses power to the central government of the new republic. Some of the ritual work continues anyway, unofficially. Do the arithmetic on that. Roughly 400 years between the arrival of Islam and the point where this becomes a story about survival. 400 years is not tolerance, and it is not acceptance. Their status was falling the whole time, but it is long enough to kill the sentence that 100 videos about this subject are built on, that a religion arrived and a third gender ended. Something did end them. It shows up in the middle of the 20th century, and it is not a doctrine. It is an armed political movement in a new republic, and it comes with a name, a commander, and a date. Titiek Suliyati, at Universitas Diponegoro, published a paper in 2018 in an Indonesian anthropology journal called Endogamy. It has a DOI. I resolved it live, through Crossref, and pulled the abstract in her own words. Her sentence: the number and activities of Bissu are decreasing because of the changing of the government system from monarchy to republic and, in her words, the DI-TII rebellion in 1950 that wanted to abolish Bissu existence due to the abuse of Islamic law. Read what that sentence actually contains. Two causes, side by side. A change in the shape of the state kingdoms replaced by a republic, which is what took the Bissu's institutional home away in 1957, and an armed rebellion that explicitly wanted them gone. DI-TII stands for Darul Islam, Tentara Islam Indonesia. In South Sulawesi, it was led by a man named Kahar Muzakar, and it ran from 1950 until his death. And note her phrasing on the justification. Not because of Islamic law, because of the abuse of Islamic law. That is an anthropologist writing in Indonesia, in an Indonesian journal, choosing that word. And look at the verb she uses for what the rebellion wanted. Not to convert them, not to ban the ceremonies, to abolish their existence. You can outlaw a practice and the people go on living. Abolishing an existence is a different order of ambition, and it is her word. In an abstract I pulled myself, not mine. I want to be precise about why this one source is carrying so much weight in this video. It is the only account I could reach tonight that establishes the suppression, independently, without routing through anybody's reading of a work of fiction. You are about to find out why that sentence matters more than it should. There is a doctoral thesis from Cornell, from 1974, by Barbara Sillers Harvey, on tradition, Islam, and rebellion in South Sulawesi. Every serious account of this rebellion runs back to it. I could not get a copy, so everything I tell you about the mechanics of that rebellion is running one step further from the source than I would like, and you should hold it that way. Now, the crackdown itself. And this is where the story you will find online stops holding together. There is a campaign against the Bissu that gets named and dated in article after article, always as one event, always under Kahar Muzakar's command. Ritual objects destroyed, practitioners hunted, men pressured to renounce the role and live as ordinary men. One widely repeated summary places that campaign, at its most intense, in 1966. Kahar Muzakar was shot dead by the Indonesian army on the 3rd of February, 1965. Date and circumstances confirmed in two independent Indonesian reference sources, including the National History Encyclopedia. He did not command anything in 1966. He had been dead for a year. And when you go back into the Indonesian language material carefully, the reason for the confusion is sitting right there in the paragraph breaks. One passage describes the DI-TII campaign running to 1965, accusing the Bissu of heresy and feudal superstition. A separate passage, a few lines later, opens with, "When the New Order regime began, in 1965, and describes ritual regalia being destroyed after accusations that the holders were communists." Those are not the same event. Different years, different governments, different accusation. Under the first, you were an infidel. Under the second, you were a communist in the exact years Indonesia was killing people by the hundreds of thousands over that word. Two regimes, two crimes, same people. I am not going to merge them for you, and I want to name what merging them does. It produces a cleaner story, one villain, one motive, easy to tell in 90 seconds. It also quietly moves an entire wave of anti-communist violence off the page. A channel that flattens that to make a tidier tragedy is a channel you should watch more skeptically, and I would rather hand you the seam than paper over it. Now, let me take my own best material away from you, because you are going to meet it somewhere else this week, and I want you armed. Search this subject and you will find details with teeth, a named victim, a specific method of killing, a quoted line about whose blood was considered lawful to spill. They are vivid, they are devastating, and they are the reason this story travels. I read 3 papers that carry those details. All 3 are real academic publications. One of them has a DOI I verified myself. And all 3, in their own methods sections, say the same thing. Their primary data is the fiction of a contemporary Indonesian writer named Faisal Adang, a 2018 novel and 2 earlier short stories analyzed through sociology of literature and a theory of hegemony. That is a completely legitimate kind of scholarship. Those papers are not doing anything wrong. They are studying a novel, and they say so on the first page. What went wrong happened downstream. Someone read the paper, lifted the vivid line, dropped the words in the novel, and published a summary. Then the next person cited the summary. So, a real DOI does not mean a detail is history. It means the article exists. Those are different claims, and the gap between them is where this entire subject now lives. I am not repeating the name. I am not repeating the method of killing. I am not repeating the line about lawful blood. If they are true, they deserve a source better than a novelist's imagination, and the people they happen to deserve better than being quoted out of Chapter 4. 2 more things, and then I want you out of here without a fantasy in your pocket. 1. Do not walk away with a queer utopia in your head. The clothing rule from the first minute of this video was an obligation, not a liberation, and where you can get near the individual lives, the picture stops behaving. A 19th-century Dutch observer described the Bissu as celibate, sexually incapable. A Dutch anthropologist doing fieldwork between 1936 and 1949 found practitioners who were married men. One of those men was writing about a category. The other was meeting people. The category loses. 2. There is no number in this video, not one figure for how many Bissu were killed or how many are left. I looked. Suliyati does not give one. Nobody I could reach with a name attached gives one. The numbers you will see are unattributed, and a subject this politically loaded is exactly where an unsourced figure goes to become permanent. And one correction to the way I have been talking, which I have been doing on purpose so I could fix it here. I have used the past tense for most of this video. That is wrong. Andaya, writing in the early 2000s, describes the Bissu holding a respected position in contemporary Bugis society present tense in his sentence. Suliyati, in 2018, writes that their numbers and activities are decreasing, also present tense. There are Bissu now. The most recent scholarship I could verify with a live DOI treats them as people you could go and meet, not a category that closed, which changes what this video is. It is not an obituary. It is a report on a living community whose paperwork got destroyed twice, and about whom the most widely shared account currently circulating is a novel. Getting this wrong is not a historiographical error. There are people who would have to read it. So the Bissu of South Sulawesi, priests before Islam arrived, and priests for 400 years after it did. What ended that was not a doctrine, and not a century. It was a rebellion in a new republic, and then a second government with a different accusation, and between the two of them, the institutional ground the Bissu stood on was gone, and then the second erasure, which is the one still running, the regalia burned, and the archive thinned. And into that gap walked a novelist, a good one, writing in good faith, in 2018, and his sentences are now doing the work that the missing documents used to do. They have always been here. It is the paperwork about them that keeps getting replaced. A people can be erased twice, once by the men who come for them, once by the better story that arrives afterwards, and gets told so well that nobody goes back to check. Thank you to our family watching from Los Angeles. Welcome to Petty Past, the history class you were owed.